For decades, Intel didn't just make computer chips. It decided who won and who lost in the tech world. Then, one day, Intel stopped winning. How did one of the most powerful monopolies in history lose its grip on the future? Back in the 1990s and early 2000s, Intel was an unstoppable force. The phrase "Intel Inside" wasn't just a clever marketing slogan. It was a stamp of quality, a guarantee of performance. If you were buying a computer, whether it was a Dell, an HP, or a Gateway, it almost certainly had an Intel processor at its heart. The company was so dominant that its main competitor, AMD, was constantly fighting just to survive. Intel didn't just participate in the market, it defined it. It set the pace for performance. It dictated pricing across the entire industry. And its famous TikTok model determined the rhythm of innovation for everyone else. At its absolute peak, Intel wasn't just a company. It was the central nervous system of personal computing. It decided what the future looked like, and the rest of the industry simply followed. This incredible success created a sense of certainty inside the company, almost a kind of corporate dogma. Intel's leadership operated on a few core beliefs that seemed unshakable. First, the personal computer would always be the center of the technological universe. Second, performance was all about raw clock speed. Making chips faster and faster was the only metric that mattered. And third, their manufacturing superiority was a permanent, God-given advantage. No one could build chips as well as they could, and no one ever would. For a long time, this mindset wasn't just successful. It was wildly profitable. It worked perfectly, right up until the moment the entire world of computing began to change around them. That change came in the form of a small, glowing rectangle, the smartphone. When the first smartphones began to emerge, Intel looked at them and essentially shrugged. From their perspective, mobile chips were a completely different and far less important category. They were low power, which meant they weren't real processors. They offered low profit margins compared to the high-end chips they were selling for PCs. And frankly, they were just less prestigious. Intel saw itself as the maker of engines for powerful computers, not gadgets. So, they dismissed mobile computing as a niche, a side market that would never seriously challenge the PC. But while Intel was looking the other way, companies like Apple and a small British firm called ARM saw something different. They didn't see a side market, they saw the future. And that's where ARM changed everything. ARM had a completely different philosophy for designing chips. Instead of chasing raw, brute force power like Intel, ARM focused on efficiency. Their designs were all about getting the most performance out of the least amount of electricity. This was perfect for phones, where battery life is everything. It was perfect for devices that needed to stay cool without a big, noisy fan. And because their business model was based on licensing their designs to others, it was perfect for scaling up to billions of devices. Intel, with its massive, power-hungry architecture, tried to pivot and compete in the mobile space, but it was too little, too late. By the time Intel finally took the threat seriously, it was already over. ARM wasn't just in some phones, it was everywhere. But the mobile mistake was only half the story. The other, arguably bigger disaster was the collapse of Intel's manufacturing advantage. For decades, the one thing nobody could dispute was that Intel had the best factories in the world, what they call fabs. They were always years ahead of everyone else in shrinking the tiny transistors on their chips, a process known as moving to a new node. This was their crown jewel, their ultimate weapon. Then, suddenly, it wasn't. The company hit a wall. It faced massive, embarrassing delays in moving from its 14-nanometer process to the next generation, 10-nanometer process. While Intel was stuck, its competitors saw their chance. A Taiwanese company called TSMC, which manufactures chips for others, didn't just catch up. It blew past Intel, offering smaller, more efficient manufacturing to anyone with the money to pay for it. Intel's most important edge, the one thing that made it untouchable, was gone. With the door wide open, Intel's competitors didn't just walk through, they sprinted. AMD, once left for dead, completely reinvented itself under CEO Lisa Su. Their Ryzen processors suddenly started beating Intel on performance, features, and price, something that had been unthinkable just a few years earlier. And then came the ultimate betrayal. Apple, one of Intel's biggest and most prestigious customers, announced it was ditching Intel entirely to design its own chips, built by TSMC. This was a massive vote of no confidence. Major customers in the lucrative data center market also started losing faith, unable to trust Intel's unreliable product roadmap. For the first time in its modern history, Intel wasn't leading. It was reacting, desperately trying to catch up to a world that was leaving it behind. So what happened? It wasn't a single bad decision. It was culture. Intel's internal culture, forged during its years of dominance, valued predictability, caution, and avoiding risk. Decisions had to go through layers and layers of management. The company became slow and bureaucratic. Meanwhile, its competitors were built for speed. Companies like AMD, NVIDIA, and Apple embraced risk, made quick decisions, and innovated at a blistering pace. The industry had shifted from a marathon, where Intel's steady pace always won, to a series of sprints, and Intel simply couldn't keep up. The very culture that made it so successful in one era became its biggest liability in the next. So, can Intel recover? It's important to remember that Intel is still a massive, powerful company with immense resources and engineering talent. It's not going away, but its era of absolute dominance is over. Today, the company is in a fight for its life. Not to control the industry, but just to regain relevance in a world it once ruled without question. In the end, Intel didn't lose because its engineers weren't smart or because it ran out of money. Not a temporary advantage that had to be earned every single day. In technology, nothing is forever. No moat is uncrossable, and no throne is safe. The moment you believe you've won is the moment you've already started to lose. If you found this story interesting,